Hey! Season 2 of the Scooby-Doo Show, originally part of Scooby's All-Star Laugh Olympics, is probably full of some of the most iconic episodes. I've already covered some of the best, and also the weirdest, from the pterodactyl ghost in Hang In There, Scooby-Doo, to the spooky case of the Grand Prix race, the Ozark witch switch, and even Creepy Cruise. There's another episode I think is really memorable for a lot of reasons though, and I think it's time we look into it. Season 2, Episode 1 of the Scooby-Doo Show, The Curse of Viking Lake, originally aired September 10th, 1977. Something interesting about this episode is a unique feature it shares with the episode I covered in the very first video on this channel, Vampire Bats and Scaredy Cats. Perhaps the best episode of the season, and for me of this series. That is to say, a rough cut with several differences to this episode exists and sometimes gets put out or featured instead of the final cut, such as on Canada's Teletoon network, which is fitting as one of the possible locations for this episode could be the Canadian province of Newfoundland and Labrador. Vikings had only one real North American settlement located there, which was called Vinland. Anyone out here a big Vinland Saga watcher or reader? Space Hunter M has even compiled some of the examples of stark differences, which can be down to the music. Visually, the rough cut features some pretty different animation and framing that hadn't been finalized or later would be changed.
What do you know? I caught me a dogfish.
The audio is very different as well though, as not only does this version not feature a laugh track, it also features different music cues. The final cut features the intentional background music composed by Hoyt Curtin for the show, while the rough cut uses generic pre-existing music score composed by Ted Nichols for Scooby-Doo Where Are You?
And that's the whole story, Sheriff Swinson.
You have my word, kids. We'll do our very best to locate this young lady's uncle.
And that's the whole story, Sheriff Swinson.
You have my word, kids. We'll do our very best to locate this young lady's uncle.
This doesn't necessarily change anything about the episode, but it is kind of interesting to get this kind of glimpse into a show like this. As we go into this episode, this is where we get to the sad part of Season 2 of the Scooby-Doo Show that must always be brought up, which is that, due to how the series is split up by Warner Brothers, this season has never been released in full on home video, and like the spooky case of the Grand Prix race, this is one of the episodes that has actually never once been released on home video at all, not even on a compilation VHS or DVD somewhere, which is a shame because it's a good one. Let's get into it and what's so strong for this mystery. Being in the title, we open up on a lake, where inside a cabin, we find Velma's archaeologist uncle, John. This is his only appearance, but it's always fun and interesting to meet a family member of the gang. He hears a horn sound and rushes to look out, spotting a Viking ship, a shadow coming upon him. A Viking says he's violated the ancient Viking burial grounds and will pay the price. Fun fact about this guy's helmet here, Viking raiders did not actually wear horns on their helmets like this despite the prominence in pop culture now. This popular myth originated from German Romantic composer Richard Wagner's famous operas, which became an icon with the Viking mythos by the 1870s. If you don't immediately recognize that name, iconic 1957 Merry Melody short What's Opera Doc is actually a parody of his operas directly, Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd being dressed appropriately. Anyway, the gang are on their way to see Uncle John, who invited them to come fishing, though it's kind of too cold to be out here for that. Everyone is in their classic warm winter gear and freezing, even in the van. They make it to the cabin, smoke rising from the chimney and lights on, and Fred is looking crazy tired here. Major eye bags for some reason. Of course, nobody answers the door, so they go inside, but find it empty, just a chair on its side and a pot of coffee brewing. While a helmet falls on Scoob, the others find a logbook Uncle John was keeping, recounting that he started having weird experiences at Viking Lake, like a ghostly ship floating on the water. Speaking of, one peeks in at Scoob as Daphne reads that John solved the mystery of the lake, but he weirdly stops writing in the middle of the sentence, the pen dragging over the paper. Shaggy immediately suggests John was grabbed by a ghost from the ship, and Velma finds some Viking runes that her uncle drew that might be important.
What's a rune?
It's a kind of writing the Vikings used.
Ooh.
Scoop tries to tell everyone about the Viking, who then opens the window, but he's so scared he has to write it out. Even so, nobody sees it, but they do all agree something weird is happening. Checking outside, they find strange footprints with no heel or sole, so the trio decide they'll follow them into the forest, while Shag and Scoob check out the lake. Unfortunately, the boys do in fact hear that strange horn sound and spot the Viking ship on the lake, and they end up washing away on a log themselves, ramming right into the ship, of course. They snatch the boys aboard and continue to be on their tails no matter matter where they run to, so Shaggy jumps into the lake. Scooby puts on his beautiful diving cap first, lands into a net that bounces him back up and almost gets him got, but does splash down with his friend finally. The trio find a second set of footprints out farther, just as the boys swim ashore and join them, now able to even point to the ship leaving. So Fred decides it's time to talk with the sheriff. Also, I love this weird shot of Shaggy having more modern whites to his eyes by accident. This Viking is not having it though. As the sheriff promises to locate John, Velma asks if anyone else has gone missing, which it turns out 2 young geologists are still missing out there as well, having vanished 3 months ago when doing research at the lake. Seems the Vikings are not liking the information exchange here. Fred suggests deciphering the Viking runes John found could help, but the sheriff says their museum curator would be the best help and that's closed for the night. They decide to try anyway, making it to the dedicated Viking museum in the rain. Definitely looks freaky. Mr. Hansen, the curator, says the museum is closed, but when they declare an emergency and explain, he allows them to enter. Inside, the storm has killed the power, leaving all the Viking decor and dummies to be extra spooky. Mr. Hansen explains the Vikings settled here at Viking Lake several centuries ago, according to ancient runes similar to what John found. And as one of those creeps looks in, he says her uncle's discovery translates to an ancient Viking curse. A great evil will befall those who disturb the burial ground. Mr. Hansen sees them out and warns them to remember what happened to the others. A Viking watches as the gang look for the burial ground, hoping John will be there. The whole area is full of underground steam to make it interesting though. Once again, they split up like before, and Daphne quickly finds John's fishing hat left behind, and it seems like someone was dragged off. Down a little farther, they find a cave, which is as hot as a steam bath inside, and on the wall they find a painting of a Viking marking the burial ground, at least according to Velma. A terrifying Viking yells out at them, blocking the entrance, chasing them as they block the door that feels a little too modern in my opinion. Another Viking poofs in to pray to the statue of Odin to strike them down, and with another poof, all 3 vanish. During all that, the boys are heating up hot dogs using steam, of course. The other 3 find themselves locked away and only getting hotter and hotter, depending on the boys to find them. Luckily, the 2 catch on and go looking, finding the cave as a Viking follows them. Scooby uses a helmet to get the door to open up, and they hide behind the statue of Odin, which seems to give the Viking the slip. The trio try yelling for help, which the boys hear, and Scooby gets thrown up by some steam and activates a secret passage on top of the statue. The trio run out safely at the last minute, but instead of enjoying their reunion, they immediately split up again to search for John. Another creep chases the boys around, who welcome him to their steamy spa massage parlor, and oh, Scooby, that is a very interesting costume. Given that he's a dog, it wouldn't be that bad if not for the eyes. Oh, he wasn't done. It's the way this wasn't even necessary, it's just for the love of the game. Probably the easiest end to one of these, they oil him up and slide him out. The trio reach a dead end meanwhile, discovering John's glasses, which at least tells them they are on the right track. A mouse freaks Daphne out, who jumps up and grabs these to get away, which turns out to be the secret entrance key. Very crazy turn of events. The boys catch up just in time, and down in the underground cavern, they see the supposed ghost ship that seems to be unloading something while also having a lot of modern looking machinery. For a third time this episode, they split up again, and the boys see a Viking heading right for where the others went, so they hop in a cart to follow. Shaggy has some real backbone for once, choosing himself to be bait to save the others. The good news is their noise catches their attention. The bad news is their attention is on them. Somehow, Scooby is able to make the Scooby-Dooby bikocopter, and the 2 fly up safe while the Vikings crash, free to fly away. The trio find a ton of speed turbines to make power, explaining the machinery they saw, but power for what? They suddenly hear John's voice, and there he is, hanging way up high in a cage like an animal. The boys fly in just in time, Scooby hopping onto the cage so Shaggy can fly John down safe, but a Viking starts cutting the rope cage, Shaggy just barely making it as Scooby jumps and causes them to start spiraling, landing right in the trash, and right next to the Vikings. Everyone now being chased, they send John to go get help, but then they all circle around and crash. That's not going to stop them though, as Velma just picks everybody up and runs off, safe on the other end of a pipe that they move and dump the Vikings through, unmasking them. Presenting to the sheriff, it's none other than the museum curator himself and the 2 missing geologists, all working together. So rather than red herrings, it was actually just every viable suspect being guilty. As it always goes, the geologists found uranium on the lake shore and partnered with the curator to drum up the Viking legends to frighten people away while they stole it all. They also used all the natural steam to run the machinery.
And if your uncle hadn't have caught him at it, Velma, Papa, they might have gotten away with it.
Not with you kids on the job.
John suggests they finally get to fishing, Scooby keeping a Viking helmet for himself out on the water as they get to it. Shaggy ultimately ends up catching Scooby instead, however, but there are worse things to catch on Viking Lake as we now know. And that's the curse of Viking Lake. I wouldn't say the Vikings themselves are up there with the scariest villains of the show, but this is definitely another strong entry in this particular season of this show, and the season premiere no less. Starting us off with Uncle John is a nice touch, as it gives us a good reason for the gang to be somewhere specific this time, and when they realize he's missing, it also gives them a real emotional investment in solving this. They aren't just helping someone out that they came upon by chance. There are real stakes for them to find a loved missing family member who might be in danger. We also have a nice remote setting that feels more isolating and dangerous, even if it does eventually turn into a bunch of caves, as is often the case. The use of Viking ghosts certainly makes some sense. They can look pretty scary and intimidating to the imagination the way we see them now, and there's basic lore to pull from, even if that lore is more so the mythos that's strayed a lot further from reality. Even if not the most frightening, they are memorable. You don't have too many Vikings going after Scooby, and it is interesting that we don't even have red herrings. Everybody but the sheriff and uncle are actually just involved here, and they have to be. There are too many of these guys running around. The episode has a lot of good gags and visuals as well, from Scooby's note, or the steam shooting him up, to the vehicle he seems to produce out of thin air, conveniently allowing him to fly up and save the uncle. Daphne even has a decent amount to do, which I appreciate always, from finding the hat to discovering the secret passage, even if it's because she was scared. And it's kind of fun to see them in the winter outfits in an episode that isn't technically winter themed, it's just really cold. And they of course have like 2 outfits total that they bring with them at any given time. I think it's even nice that Shaggy decides entirely on his own to be bait and save his friends without having to be talked into it or have it be suggested. It's moments like that that you really do feel like these are people that care about each other. I wouldn't say this episode is outright exceptional, especially when there are so many classics in this particular iteration of the franchise, but it really is a solid episode worth watching. That's why it's kind of a shame that it's one of the episodes that has completely fallen through the cracks. Sure, you can watch it on streaming, at least when Warner Brothers hasn't taken the show down entirely, but never even having a single home video release seems unbelievable to me. We've had so many countless DVDs and VHS tapes of random episodes compiled together over the years, and that's how many of the previously unreleased episodes from this season have made it to home video, and yet somehow this one still hasn't made it to any of them. Like the Grand Prix episode, I really don't understand why, because these really are great episodes. There's nothing to hold them back for compared to any other Scooby series, so I'm going to continue to hope that this one will find its way home someday in an official capacity. If you haven't seen this one before and still watched this anyway, definitely check it out for yourself, and if it's been a while since you've seen it, be sure to keep it in your rotation of episodes rather than counting it out. And if you haven't seen my other videos covering this season, definitely check out the Creepy Cruise video or the Grand Prix video or any of the others. I'll see you out on Viking Lake. Bye!